spring marked a huge milestone for my family when we finally moved into our dream home. We bought the property years ago, and thanks to the pandemic giving us time to focus on the project, we were able to build exactly what we wanted. The location was perfect, middle of nowhere, with the closest neighbor about a mile down the road. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Being a huge drifting enthusiast, I decided to use our few hundred acres to recreate professional drift tracks from major championships. We built exact replicas of tracks from Wall, New Jersey, Riga, Irwindale, California, Texas, Poland, Seattle, and Englishtown, New Jersey. Everything was properly permitted and approved by the county. To make things even better, we built 6 drift cars, each pushing 800 horsepower with Chevrolet V8 engines. We've got a BMW E36, BMW E46, a 1996 Silvia, a 2013 BRZ, a 2015 Mustang, and a 2016 MX-5. I'm mentioning all this because, yeah, it gets loud and smoky here. It's basically a drift farm. For 7 or 8 months, everything was perfect, except for one incident where some trespasser wrecked his car and our shed. Today things got interesting. My cousin and his 17-year-old son were visiting for the holidays. Since my cousin and I grew up drifting together, we were super excited to take his boy out on the track. We grabbed a couple of cars and started having fun. About 40 minutes in, while we were changing tires, I heard sirens. I walked out of the garage to see 2 fire engines, several police cars, and an SUV coming down my driveway. When they pulled up, I politely asked if I could help them. The officers explained they'd received reports about a fire and noise complaints. I showed them around the tracks and presented my county documentation proving everything was legal. That's when this guy I'd never met before, apparently my neighbor, came storming up. The neighbor immediately started ranting about how unacceptable the situation was, demanding our arrest and complaining about the unbearable noise. The police sergeant quickly put him in his place, explaining that we weren't doing anything illegal and outlining our rights to make noise up until 10 p.m. on weekdays and 11 p.m. on weekends. The neighbor's response was to call us old jerks before turning his anger on the sergeant, cursing at him, which definitely wasn't a smart move. The fire department, seeing no actual fire, promptly left the scene. The police then issued the neighbor a trespassing warning before he stormed off. Some of the officers actually stayed to watch us drift, and I extended an offer for free lessons if they were interested. But wait, it gets better. Later that day, the neighbor showed up at my door again, completely unhinged. He started making threats, declaring that we would stop racing cars on our property and threatening to destroy all our vehicles. He was literally shaking with rage, practically foaming at the mouth. He actually called the police himself this time, probably thinking they'd side with him. Instead, when they arrived and I explained what happened, they arrested him for trespassing, since, he'd already been warned earlier that day. I found out later that he lives over a mile away and had apparently been fuming about our track for months, but never bothered to actually come talk to us about it until today. We're zoned for commercial and automotive use on top of residential, which is exactly why we chose this property in the first place. The police told me he's spending the night in jail, and they're recommending harassment charges based on his threats to destroy our vehicles. I guess some people just can't handle others enjoying their legally obtained property. At least we got some entertainment out of it, and the cops seemed to enjoy the show. I was reminded of this crazy psycho Karen a few hours ago, while reading about a person who used German to communicate with a crazy Karen. This event happened maybe 15 or so years ago, but many of the events are still very clear in my mind. Not because of how traumatic it was, but mostly due to the fact I had to play it out to the bitter end. It took a lot of self-control and discipline to keep up the ruse, but the end result still makes me laugh to this day. I will admit this was not one of my finer moments in my lifetime, but I still see it as a learning event for everyone involved. I am fairly good at sign language. I really learned it while doing a summer school or computer camp for some deaf and blind children. I took a course before the class so I could learn the basics aside from the normal alphabet. By the end of the summer, I had become very good at signing and understanding whole conversations and could communicate very well with my students. I personally think I learned way more from them than they learned from me. But that is a story for the wholesome side of Reddit. It all happened while I was at a Kmart. I was there looking for a specific item. I don't recall exactly what it was at this time. It's really not important to the story. I was putting some things back on the shelf that I had moved when I heard someone clearing their throat. I just ignored it. I recall just not wanting to deal with people that day. So someone trying to get my attention was not at the top of my list. The noise was made again, only louder and more determined. The Karen cleared her throat again, more forcefully this time. I continued to ignore it. She then called out to be excused in an increasingly angry tone. I still didn't respond. I could hear her foot tapping, so I, having completed what I was doing, started to move away. It was at this time she grabbed my arm. She pulled my arm to turn me around to face her while demanding my attention in an aggressive tone. Startled, I let out a quick yelp and signed that I hadn't seen her. She responded by demanding to know what I was doing and accused me of being rude. I signed back that I was deaf and hadn't heard her, while also expressing that she had no right to grab me and asking her to leave me alone. She then began yelling about me, waving my hands around, accusing me of making gang signs to intimidate her and demanding that I stop immediately. At this point, her yelling had drawn the attention of several customers as well as the store manager. A normal patron tried to explain to her that I was using sign language and couldn't hear her. The store manager attempted to defuse the situation by asking her to step away from me. The Karen refused to leave me alone, insisting that I was making gang signs to threaten her. She demanded that someone call the police immediately. She maintained her tight grip on my arm, even tighter than my farm girl mother's grip had ever been. Her fingernails dug into my arm deeply enough to leave significant bruises. Despite the attempts of other customers and the manager to intervene, she refused to release me. This continued for several minutes, with me trying to pull away, her screaming, and others attempting to separate us. Someone must have called the police, though I'm not sure how much time passed. When you're being assaulted by a Karen, time seems to move differently. When 3 officers arrived, they immediately commanded her to release me, stop screaming, and calm down. She responded by demanding my arrest, claiming I had threatened her with gang signs. I quickly moved away from the area, with the manager positioning himself between us as a barrier. The officers had to handcuff her before she would communicate rationally. Once things calmed down, an officer approached me to get my statement. Committed to maintaining my pretense of being deaf, I continued signing. The officer, believing I was deaf, took out his notepad and gestured for me to write down what happened. I wrote explaining how she had grabbed and hurt me while I was shopping, and how I had tried to communicate that I couldn't hear. I showed him my arm where the bruising and gouge marks were becoming visible. The officer then confronted her about the severity of her actions, emphasizing that I was deaf and had been using sign language, not gang signs. She responded with defensive excuses, claiming she couldn't be expected to know sign language and suggesting that stores should provide assistance for deaf people. She insisted it wasn't her fault and that I should have simply spoken to her. The police escorted her to their patrol car. After taking statements from me, other witnesses, and the store manager, and requesting security footage, they told me I could leave. I drove away laughing, aware that I had been a jerk but feeling satisfied with the outcome. In the aftermath, she was charged with assault and creating a public disturbance. Based on the statements, video footage, and photos of my injuries, her lawyers negotiated a plea deal. No jail time but $1,600 fine and 450 hours of community service. I received court notification about the plea deal as my state requires informing supposedly disabled victims of such arrangements. I had the option to contest the deal if I felt it was unfair. To avoid potentially appearing in court, I simply signed and returned the paperwork. I acknowledged that my actions weren't entirely ethical, especially given my young age at the time. While I mainly wanted to teach her a lesson about treating people properly, I recognize it wasn't the best way to handle the situation. However, I still consider what might have happened if she had treated one of my actual deaf students or another deaf person this way. That thought somewhat justifies my actions in my mind, even though I know it wasn't the right approach. I've lived next door to this couple for about 5 years. The wife was what you'd call a neighborhood menace, always starting fights over the pettiest things and calling the police on people for absolutely no reason. She got arrested a few times for causing public disturbances and resisting arrest, but we all hoped she'd eventually calm down. Instead, she got worse. The real turning point came when she got into a car accident while texting and driving. Her 6-month-old grandson was in the car with her. That incident finally landed her in jail for a decent stretch, and it was the last straw for her husband. While she was serving her time, her husband, who was actually a really decent guy, decided he'd had enough and started divorce proceedings. He even met someone new, a lovely woman, who lived nearby. I didn't know much about their relationship, but they seemed really happy together. So there we were last 4th of July, my family and I sitting on our back deck, enjoying some ice cream and waiting for the fireworks to start. That's when we heard it. We heard Karen screaming at Anna, calling her a stupid jerk. The scream was so loud it made me drop my spoon. We turned to see Karen storming out of her house with her husband and his girlfriend Anna following behind. From our deck, we had a perfect view of everything. I mean, we weren't trying to eavesdrop, but it was impossible not to watch the drama unfolding. Karen started screaming about how she couldn't believe he was abandoning her to fend for herself, especially after everything she claimed to have done for their family. Her husband tried to reason with her, explaining that he'd given her countless chances, but her repeated jail time had become too much to handle. He told her they needed to move on since their relationship clearly wasn't working anymore. That set her off even more. She turned her rage toward Anna, calling her a homewrecker and accusing her of stealing her life. She lunged at Anna, but her husband stepped between them. Then, in a move that left us all gasping, Karen pulled out her keys and started attacking Anna's car, puncturing the tires and leaving dents all over it. It took 3 people, Anna, the husband, and their teenage daughter, to pull her away, and even then they struggled to hold her back. My dad had already called the police, and when they arrived, Karen made the brilliant decision to attack one of the officers. I watched as they had to tase her to get her under control. The police interviewed everyone, including my parents, since we'd witnessed the whole thing. The aftermath was pretty much what you'd expect. Karen went back to jail, the divorce was finalized, and she lost custody of her daughter. The husband was actually kind enough not to make her pay for Anna's car repairs since she was broke. She ended up having to beg her older son, the father of the grandson she'd endangered, to let her stay with him until she could get back on her feet. These days, things are much more peaceful in our neighborhood. Karen's ex-husband and Anna still live next door, and they're actually getting married next month. They're having a small ceremony at their house, and I wondered what Karen would think if she knew the woman she tried to attack is now going to be her ex-husband's wife. I haven't been yelled at for breathing too loudly or existing in my own backyard since she left. Amazing how removing one person can bring so much peace to an entire neighborhood. I've been working in coffee shops for about 5 years now, and I absolutely love what I do. Last year I landed a job at this cute little coffee shop in one of those tourist hotspots everyone loves to visit. It's usually pretty busy, but during holiday season, complete madness. We're talking lines out the door from opening until closing. This day was especially hectic. Our display case was running empty because we'd sold out of almost everything. My coworker was handling the register and making drinks while I was restocking our pastries. It's worth mentioning that our shop is pretty small, just 2 of us working each shift, which usually works fine. So there I am, clearly not behind the counter, arms full of pastries, when this woman approaches me clutching a bottle of kombucha. She asked if she could just give me the money for the kombucha and leave. I explained that I couldn't help her at the moment since I wasn't at the register and was busy restocking. She demanded to know why I couldn't just take the money. I had to explain that since it was store property, the money needed to be properly rung up at the register, and suggested she ask my co-worker for help instead. She complained about not wanting to wait in line, saying it was ridiculous. I tried to reason with her, explaining that other customers were also waiting to buy simple items like water bottles, and it wouldn't be fair to let her skip ahead. That's when she really lost it, declaring the whole situation was stupid and that we were a coffee shop, not a bakery, as if that had anything to do with it. She slammed the kombucha bottle back onto the shelf and stormed out. I honestly didn't think much of it. We were swamped, and I had pastries to stock and customers to serve. Several customers in line who witnessed the whole thing actually gave me sympathetic looks, and one even thanked me for standing my ground. That made me feel a bit better about the whole situation. The next day, my manager called me aside. Apparently, Karen, as I now call her, had left quite the review online. According to her post, I was a barista that lacks all empathy and is void of humanity, who refused to sell her kombucha because I'm only capable of putting out pastries. She even threw in some offensive language about mental disabilities, which I won't repeat. She went on to claim that she was a loyal customer, which was funny because I'd never seen her before, and that she spent thousands of dollars at our shop annually. We'd only been open for 8 months. My manager was super understanding and just wanted to hear my side. After I explained everything, she responded to the review professionally, but stating that while she was sorry for any inconvenience, we have rules in place, and I was within my rights to refuse service. She also mentioned that cutting lines wasn't acceptable behavior, and that all customers deserve equal respect and treatment. Karen, of course, wasn't done. She kept responding to the manager's reply with more and more outraged comments, each one more ridiculous than the last. She threatened to contact corporate, were independently owned, demanded that I be fired, and even claimed she would organize a boycott of our shop. My manager just ignored her after that, and thankfully, I never saw Karen in our shop again. My curiosity got the better of me and I looked up her review history. Let me tell you, this woman was a professional complainer. She left negative reviews everywhere she went. My personal favorites? She gave the airport 1 star because it was too busy. It's an airport, what did she expect? And she left a scathing review of a bank's ATM because the bank manager had parked in the closest spot, forcing her to walk through the parking lot like a common peasant. She'd even left a 1-star review for a local park because the birds were too loud and inconsiderate of peaceful morning walks. The whole thing became a running joke at work. Whenever someone would get cranky about waiting in line, we'd whisper, "At least they're not airport Karen," to each other. We even started keeping a tally of how many times people tried to skip the line each day, turning it into a friendly competition between shifts. The morning crew usually won, but we afternoon workers maintained that our entitled customers were more dramatic. Our shop's reputation actually improved after her review. Several regular customers who saw her online rant left their own positive reviews defending us, and we ended up getting a flood of supportive messages and new customers who appreciated our fair treatment policy. Some even specifically mentioned they came in because they loved how my manager handled the situation. Made those busy holiday shifts a lot more bearable. Funny enough, about 6 months later, I spotted her in line at a busy Starbucks across the street, waiting patiently like everyone else. I guess she learned that her entitled behavior wouldn't work anywhere in our little tourist town. Or maybe she just ran out of places to complain about.